came on Daystar and you publicly affirmed their relationship as being of the Lord. Can you do that in good conscience without having talking to Lisa to get her side of the story?
I don't care. The great thing about being my age is I just don't care. I've got a good quality of life.
When Jimmy Evans went live, no one expected this. In front of thousands of shocked viewers, he dropped a truth bomb about Joni Lamb that left the entire studio speechless. Was it planned? Or a raw, emotional outburst caught on camera? The tension, the silence, the revelation, it all happened in real time. People are still replaying the clip, trying to process what they just heard. You won't believe what really went down on that broadcast. When Jimmy Evans went live that night, nobody expected what was about to happen. He wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to make headlines, but his words hit harder than any outburst could. In front of thousands of viewers, he admitted something that had been haunting him for years, something he had never planned to say out loud. He started calmly, almost quietly, talking about his time with the Lamb family. He said he'd always respected them, especially Joni. They had built something powerful together, a ministry that reached millions, a platform that felt blessed. But as he spoke, the tone shifted. You could hear it in his voice, the weight, the regret. Then he said it. Years ago, during a private meeting, he told Jonathan Lamb to submit to his mother, Joni, as if she were the voice of God in his life. The room went still. Viewers online froze the clip, replayed it, argued about what they had just heard. Jimmy explained that he hadn't meant to manipulate anyone. At the time, things were tense, emotions high, the family divided, the ministry struggling. He said he thought he was helping keep the peace. He wanted to avoid more conflict, to hold the family together, but deep down, he knew it didn't feel right. It wasn't truth. It was control, dressed up as loyalty. Over the years, that moment never left him. He said it haunted him, not because someone forced him, but because he knew he had gone along with something that hurt people. I thought I was protecting the ministry, he said, but really, I was protecting an illusion. That line broke something open. Fans who had trusted Daystar for decades started to question everything. How many others had been silenced in the name of peace? How much truth had been buried to keep up appearances? Jimmy didn't raise his voice or point fingers. He just told the truth. And sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted to shake the world. It only needs to be spoken out loud for the first time.
Being bold to speak the truth and to not be a part of a cover-up. And that's led us to where we are now completely free, not attached to any sort of major institution or any type of control, to where we're able to be a voice for truth and to be able to stand up against injustice and be a voice for others out there who are have been through abuse or been through a difficulty or been part of a culture that encourages people to cover things up. We're so excited that we can help be a force that can shine the light on the darkness and allow the Lord to do a cleansing work in the body of Christ. So thank you all for all the people that have written to us and supported us and loved on us. It's really just been so overwhelming.
The family meeting wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was meant to be healing. At least, that's what Jonathan Lamb hoped for when he called everyone together. The air around Daystar had been heavy for months. After Marcus died, things didn't just fall apart. They slowly unraveled. There were whispers, hurt feelings, tension no one wanted to admit. Everyone was pretending to move forward, smiling for cameras, hosting shows, preaching faith and unity. While behind the scenes, the family barely spoke to each other. Jonathan had carried the weight quietly for a long time. He had questions about how things were being run, about decisions being made too fast, about his mother's new relationship that had started almost before the grief had time to settle. But more than anything, he just wanted honesty. Not another broadcast, not another "we're fine" moment, but a real conversation. So he decided it was time. A private meeting, no cameras, no producers, no public image to maintain, just family. When everyone arrived, the atmosphere was tense from the start. Some came out of respect, others out of obligation. Jimmy Evans was there too, the trusted pastor, the voice of reason. Jonathan thought maybe with him there, things could stay calm. For a few moments, it almost felt possible. Then Joni walked in. She looked composed, confident, ready. Maybe too ready. Jonathan thought, just for a second, that maybe this would finally be the day they could talk openly. But that hope didn't last long. He started by thanking everyone for coming. His voice was steady but soft, like someone who'd rehearsed his words 100 times. He talked about how things had changed since his father passed, how it felt like the family had lost not only a leader, but also its foundation. He mentioned the pain that had built up, the confusion, the way decisions were being made without discussion. He said he wanted understanding, not confrontation. "We can't heal what we won't face," he said. For a moment, there was silence. It felt like the beginning of something honest. Then Joni reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She opened the timer app and, with no emotion in her voice, said, "You each have 60 seconds." At first, everyone thought she was joking. A few nervous laughs broke out, but she wasn't smiling. "1 minute per person," she said again. "That's all you get." The room went quiet. No one knew what to say. One by one, each person spoke, some angry, some crying, others just numb. Years of pain, confusion, and heartbreak crammed into 60 seconds. Jimmy Evans watched quietly, hoping it would somehow still turn into something redemptive. When it was Jonathan's turn again, he looked at his mother and said, "This isn't how family talks, Mom. We can't time love. We can't time forgiveness." But she didn't respond. When the last person finished, Joni stood up, looked around the room, and said, "You're all operating in fear." Then she grabbed her things and walked out. No prayer, no hug, no conversation, just silence, and the sound of the door closing behind her. The rest of the family sat there in disbelief. Some stared at the floor, others wiped away tears. It wasn't supposed to go this way. Jonathan had hoped for understanding, but what he got was distance, colder than ever before. Then, as if to make things even heavier, someone in the room turned to Jimmy and said, "You need to tell him to submit to her." Jimmy froze. He later said that in that moment, the air felt thick, wrong, almost suffocating. He didn't want to say it, but the pressure was there. The weight of the ministry, the fear of causing more division, the sense that he had to choose sides. So he said the words that would haunt him for years. "Joni is the voice of God in your life. You need to submit to her." Jonathan didn't yell. He just looked down. Those words hit him like a brick. Submit. Voice of God. It was like hearing that the truth didn't matter anymore, that love, reason, and honesty had all been replaced by control. For Jonathan and his wife Susie, that was the breaking point. They realized in that instant that they couldn't fix what didn't want to be fixed. After the meeting, they left quietly. No one chased after them. No one called that night. The house that had once been full of faith and laughter now felt like a place of shadows and silence. Jonathan told Susie, "We can't keep pretending," and she agreed. They both knew something had ended, not their love for family, but their ability to be part of something that had stopped being real. Over the next few days, things got colder. Calls stopped. Messages went unanswered. Inside the ministry, people noticed their absence, but no one asked why. It was as if they had simply vanished from the story. For Joni, life moved forward. Appearances to keep, shows to film, a wedding to plan. But for Jonathan and Susie, the illusion had finally shattered. The meeting that was meant to bring healing had done the opposite. It had stripped away the last bit of hope they had that things could return to what they once were. It exposed what was really happening. The control, the fear, the image management, the silencing of pain in the name of peace. And for Jimmy Evans, it was the beginning of his own reckoning. He would later admit that something inside him broke that day too. He had seen behind the curtain and he couldn't unsee it. In the end, no one left that meeting healed. No one found closure. The only thing that changed was the truth finally becoming too big to hide. That day didn't just change a family. It marked the moment the world behind the cameras began to crumble. And the saddest part was that it didn't have to be that way. All it would have taken was honesty. All it would have taken was one person choosing love over control. But instead, they chose silence. And silence, in the end, was louder than anything they could have said. After Marcus Lamb passed away, the whole Daystar world changed. At first, people thought it was just grief, that the strange decisions and sudden shifts were part of a family trying to stay strong through loss. But over time, it became clear that something deeper was happening. The atmosphere inside the ministry wasn't the same. It didn't feel like a place of faith and unity anymore. It felt like walking on eggshells. Joni Lamb had always been known as strong, confident, focused, determined to keep the ministry moving forward. But after Marcus died, that strength turned into something else. It wasn't leadership anymore, it was control. She made every decision herself, and questioning her became dangerous. People who once spoke freely started to go quiet. The laughter in the halls faded, meetings grew shorter, colder, more scripted. Then came Doug Weiss, the man who appeared almost overnight. Few people really knew him. He showed up on set one week, and soon he was everywhere, in planning meetings, in family gatherings, in Joni's interviews. Within months, Joni announced they were together. Not long after that, they were married. The staff was stunned. Some tried to be supportive. Others whispered behind the scenes, wondering how it had all happened so fast. But no one dared say anything out loud. The message was clear. You either celebrate the change, or you're against it. Behind the camera, people began to feel the pressure. There was an unspoken rule. Don't question, just agree. Producers were told to avoid negative topics. Staff were warned not to talk about internal issues, not even privately. If someone raised a concern about the direction of the ministry, they were labeled rebellious or out of alignment. Slowly, people who had been part of Daystar for years began to disappear. Some quietly resigned, others were let go. Jimmy Evans saw it too. He'd been part of Daystar for years, preaching about family, marriage, and forgiveness. But now, things didn't feel spiritual anymore. They felt staged. He said later that every conversation was like walking through fog, everyone pretending they were fine, but no one actually was. The ministry that once preached transparency had become a place where truth felt dangerous. Jonathan and Susie had already stepped back. They couldn't keep going along with something that didn't feel right. And without them there, the cracks became even more visible. Viewers began noticing their absence. People started asking questions online. Where's Jonathan? Why isn't Susie hosting anymore? The official answers were vague, always positive, always controlled, but the silence spoke louder than words. Meanwhile, Joni's new husband, Doug, started taking a more visible role. He spoke on broadcasts, gave advice, and started positioning himself as a spiritual leader, but his tone was different. He didn't sound like Marcus. He didn't talk about faith with gentleness or grace. He talked about authority, obedience, submission, and it matched exactly what was happening behind the scenes. The culture was shifting from ministry to monarchy. People close to the family tried to intervene. Friends like Denise Boggs reached out, writing heartfelt letters to Joni, warning her that something wasn't right, that pride and control were taking over. But those letters went unanswered. Calls stopped being returned. People who questioned Doug or the new direction were slowly removed from the circle. The saddest part was that many who stayed believed they were doing the right thing. They thought obedience meant loyalty, and silence meant faithfulness. They were afraid to speak, afraid to lose their jobs, afraid to be labeled as disloyal to God Himself. Because that's what the culture had become. Disagreement wasn't seen as human, it was seen as spiritual rebellion. Daystar kept running. The lights stayed bright. The broadcasts continued. The smiles looked genuine. But something in the spirit of the place had died. The unity that once drew millions of viewers was gone. It had been replaced by fear. People were still praying on air, still preaching about forgiveness and freedom. But behind those polished moments, many were just surviving, spiritually exhausted, emotionally drained, and silently waiting for something to change. Jimmy Evans, who had once defended the ministry with his whole heart, began to realize what was really going on. He said later that he saw how easily good intentions could be twisted into control, how a message about faith could become a weapon for silence. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. The culture inside Daystar was no longer about serving God. It was about protecting power. Every choice, every message, every carefully worded statement was designed to keep up the image that everything was fine. But those who had been there long enough knew better. The love was gone. The laughter was gone. The ministry had become a brand. And behind that brand was a family falling apart, a staff living in fear, and a truth that no one was allowed to speak. The culture of control didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, disguised as order, disguised as loyalty. But once it took hold, it left no room for grace. And that's what everyone could feel, even if no one dared to say it out loud. The fall didn't happen all at once. It was quiet at first, almost invisible. From the outside, Daystar still looked bright and strong, cameras rolling, lights glowing, hosts smiling. But inside, everything was breaking. The same people who once called each other family now barely spoke. and the trust that had held it all together for decades was slipping through their fingers. It started with whispers, little questions people weren't supposed to ask. Why isn't Jonathan on the show anymore? Where's Susie? Why does everything feel different? On air, Joni smiled and carried on like nothing was wrong. She talked about faith, strength, and moving forward. But behind that smile, there was tension, the kind that everyone could feel, but no one dared to name. The leaked audio was the spark that set it all off. It was short, just a few minutes of Jimmy Evans talking, but those few minutes were enough to change everything. In the clip, he admitted that he had once told Jonathan to submit to his mother, to see her as the voice of God. It wasn't said with anger or spite. It sounded weary, honest, even broken. But it was all the confirmation people needed. The rumors were true. The control, the silence, the manipulation. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was real. The reaction was instant. Longtime viewers flooded social media, shocked and heartbroken. Some defended Joni, saying it was all being taken out of context. Others said they had seen this coming for years. The ministry's supporters began to split into sides, those who still believed and those who felt betrayed. Inside Daystar, staff members panicked. No one knew what to say, or if they were even allowed to talk about it. Officially, there was no statement, just silence. That silence spoke louder than any words could. Employees who had been there for decades quietly resigned. Pastors stopped accepting invitations. Partner ministries began pulling their support. Donations started to drop. The cracks that had been forming for years were finally visible to everyone. People like Denise Boggs, who had loved the Lamb family for years, felt torn apart. She had tried to warn Joni that pride was blinding her, that Doug Weiss was taking over too much, too fast, but no one listened. Now, as the truth came out, it was too late. The ministry she had once believed in was turning into something she couldn't recognize. Behind the scenes, fear took over. Staff meetings were tense. People avoided eye contact. Everyone was waiting for the next leak, the next headline, the next name to disappear from the roster. The spirit that had once made Daystar a home was gone. What remained was image, polished, smiling, empty. Jimmy Evans, the man who had accidentally set the whole thing in motion, wasn't angry anymore. He was sad. He said later that he didn't plan to expose anyone. He just couldn't carry the lie anymore. He had spent years convincing himself that silence was protection, that being loyal meant not asking questions. But now he knew better. Silence had only allowed the pain to grow. And the moment he spoke the truth, everything people had tried so hard to hide started coming into the light. Jonathan and Susie stayed out of the spotlight. They didn't post statements or go on podcasts. They were exhausted. Years of holding back, trying to protect their daughter, their faith, and their family had left them drained. They just wanted peace. But even in their quiet, people reached out. Messages from viewers, letters from old friends, prayers from strangers who said, "We see you. We believe you. You're not alone." Meanwhile, Joni doubled down. On camera, she stayed upbeat, preaching about victory and blessing. She never mentioned the controversy. She didn't respond to the leaks. She just kept going, as if nothing had happened. But the audience could tell. The joy that used to radiate from her wasn't there anymore. It was replaced by something colder, something guarded. Inside the ministry, those who remained loyal to her became defensive, even aggressive. They told others to stop gossiping, to trust God's plan. But deep down, they were scared. They could feel the ground shifting beneath them. The numbers were dropping. The atmosphere was heavy. What used to be a house of worship now felt like a fortress built to keep out the truth. And yet, the truth has a way of getting in. People began talking, quietly at first, then more openly. Former employees shared their stories. Pastors admitted they had seen the red flags years ago, but stayed silent out of fear. Supporters confessed they no longer felt inspired watching the show. They felt uneasy, even sad. It wasn't just about one mistake or one family fight. It was about what happens when a ministry built on honesty stops being honest, when the people preaching about truth can't face it in their own lives. That was the real collapse. Not financial, not public, but spiritual. The trust that Daystar had with millions of believers had been broken, not by the world attacking it, but by the silence of the people inside it. As time went on, the fall became impossible to hide. Production slowed, staff left without being replaced, familiar faces vanished from the set, donors quietly withdrew, social media accounts that once overflowed with love and support were now filled with questions, heartbreak, and disappointment. And yet, through all of it, Joni kept smiling on screen. She spoke about perseverance, about pushing through storms, about keeping faith in times of trial. But for many watching, it felt hollow, because the storm she was talking about wasn't something outside, it was inside. It was her own house. What made the whole thing so tragic was how preventable it all was. The family meeting could have been a moment of healing. Jimmy's confession could have been a turning point for redemption. But instead, pride and control took over. No one wanted to look broken, no one wanted to be wrong, and so, instead of facing the truth, they tried to manage it. Now, years later, people still talk about what happened. Some have forgiven, some never will, but everyone agrees on one thing. The moment trust is gone, nothing else can stand. A ministry, a family, a legacy, they all crumble the same way. Not from one big fall, but from 1,000 small cracks that everyone ignored until it was too late. And that's how Daystar fell. Not in flames, but in silence. The lights stayed on, the cameras kept rolling, but the heart was gone. Because when truth leaves the room, all that's left is performance. And no performance, no matter how perfect, can save something that was built on trust once that trust is gone.